Welcome to the Hot Girl School, the podcast where we redefine confidence and go way beyond the reflection you see in the mirror.
We're your hosts, Lauren and Danielle, here to empower you to embrace your inner radiance because confidence is so much more than looks.
Whether you're strutting into an event or conquering the boardroom, join us as we explore topics like self-love, inner strength, and owning your unique journey to confidence.
So grab your favorite drinkie and turn up that volume because you're about to unleash your true potential.
Hello, my hotties, and welcome back to another episode of the Hot Girl School. Today, we're diving deep into the personal transformation, healing, and the great journey towards authentic self-connection. I have the pleasure of introducing you to a true pioneer in the coaching world, Alejandra. She's an award-winning master coach, global speaker, and creator of the 180 Method. Alejandra's approach combines practical coaching with a foundation of faith, allowing her clients to break free from cycles of doubt and achievement, permanent transformation, healing. And Alejandra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so excited because there's so many like new coaches out there, right, in the coaching space. So I am so excited to just capture your story today and hear about your journey because I know there's like so much gold in it. So why don't we kind of start like from the beginning? Like, how did you get started? And then we'll pull out some of like the good golden nuggets that you've learned along the way.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so how I got started, this was 21 years ago. Like coaching was not even a thing back then. So I was actually in the health and beauty industry, and I was working for a big company, Aveda, as a manager in one of their retail locations, and I got pregnant very unexpectedly. That's a whole nother story. We can dive into that if you want to, but just to stay on track, like I found myself in this place of, gosh, I really want to be at home with my daughter, but yet I had to work full time. It was a lot of my time and attention that was being taken up by work. So I decided I'm like, no, she's more important and I'll figure it out.
Yeah,
So I
love
quit
that.
my job, and I had developed a lot of relationships with, different salons or spas in the area. And after I left, they actually would end up like contacting me and asking me a lot about, hey, my front desk team is really struggling with this. How do I change that or fix it? Or, gosh, my team isn't selling. What do I do there? Or I'm struggling with this financially. Anything business related, they were reaching out to me. So finally I was like, what am I doing? I should build a business and do business consulting, because that was a thing back then.
Totally.
Consulting. So I started my own business consulting company, and through that process, I was in a place in life where things were just not good. I was really struggling personally, mentally, emotionally, financially. It was just a lot of struggle. And I was starting to see in my clients that it wasn't necessarily like the systems or structures they were missing. Like, yes, that was part of it, or they needed a specific strategy, but it was more themselves that was getting in the way. And what I came to really understand is that you are your business. And if you're not working, your business isn't going to be working.
Okay, let's repeat that because that is so good. Okay, so you said that you are your business.
You are your
and
business.
if you aren't working, your business won't be.
No.
Gold.
Yeah.
Gold.
Ultimately, you are in a relationship with everything in your life, because we typically think relationships are only with people in our lives. But you're in a relationship with yourself, and you're in a relationship with your business. You're in a relationship with your money. You're in a relationship with time. And so that's what I was like, it's all relationship based. And the relationship I was having with myself, my business, my money, like was not good, nor was it the people that I was working with. And that's how I kind of
Like
made
you
that
were
connection of
attracting
like,
that.
yeah, whoa, like it's not the system, it's them, it's me.
What
So
what
that
do you think, like, made that click for you? Because I think it's really hard sometimes for people to look internally, and especially when they're going through struggle to be like, "I
Mhm.
might be the problem." It's really
Yeah,
hard to do that.
it's very hard to do that. I started well, first it was being to the point where you're that, for lack of a better way of saying it, Danielle, like, broken. You're,
Okay.
like, that kind of broken to the point where it's like, if I don't look outside of the places I have been looking or what I think I should be looking at or who I thought I was supposed to follow or look at that, like, bottom rock bottom kind of place, so to
Yeah,
speak, there's no other alternative other than looking at the place you haven't looked, which is typically yourself.
inside.
Um, so it's first just coming to that place of, like, I just cannot keep doing the same thing I have been doing, thinking that I'm supposed to do this or I need to do this or, and not looking at myself.
Yeah,
It's an openness to go there. And so once I had that openness, that's when I started, like, really making the connection between, like, relationship and that I feel like relationship is the foundation of all success in life. Um, it all comes down to
yeah,
relationship.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
And it's funny, right? Because it's not just like we say that and we all, I feel like, can agree to it in terms of like business relationships, but it's also the same with like your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your kids. Like everything is relationships.
Yeah. And it, like, even the stuff, money, time, like,
Yeah.
our 2 biggest blockers is typically time and money.
I just did a retreat with a good friend of mine this week, and I did a class on finances. And
Yeah.
I started it with talking through limiting beliefs around money.
Yeah.
And we did like 4 pod breakouts. Every single pod, people cried. And it's to your point, like that is a really big block for people for
Yeah,
sure.
it's huge. So, yeah, it was after, like, that recognition of, "Hold on, like, I am my business, they are their business, so how do I now fix this?"
Yeah.
And at the time, the only way I knew how was therapy, and, what I found as I started, like, really diving into doing some therapy is that there was some relief, but no changes.
Hmm.
And it was taking a long time to get any kind of results from it.
Can I
And so I
ask you a
just
question on that
of
part?
course, please.
Do you feel like okay? Because I feel like I hear this a lot too, and I
Yeah,
feel like that's partly, people's resistance to therapy.
yeah,
I like, for the record, I recommend therapy to everyone, like, there's you will all benefit. Stick with it for 4 times and then try somebody new if it doesn't work out. But my question is, do you feel like you had an expectation for the therapy, like, the act of going to therapy to just fix it?
Oh, good question. Okay, hold on, because I need to, like, kinda put myself back into that space. I'm gonna say yes, just because typically, we do hold expectations for things, and that's can be a lot of what causes, disappointment of something not working
Mhm.
out is because expectation was there. So I'm gonna
Okay.
say yes, although I was not if it was fully I wasn't conscious to it.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I just
Um,
always get curious because I feel
yeah.
like that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, for me, there was this internal, like, I know that there's something else out there. There has to be something that works better and quicker, faster, and gets more to, like, the root cause of something. And so that sent me down a path of, like, what is it? I knew there was something.
Mhm.
And that's actually when I was introduced to life coaching. It was like going to therapy for about a year, not a lot of changes. Again, I felt better, but I think it was because it was like I was talking. I was getting stuff out and
Yeah.
they'd give me some advice, but listen, people resist what they hear but believe what they say.
Yeah. Say that one again. There's another golden nugget, y'all.
People resist what they hear but believe what they say.
So good.
So with like getting the advice too, like that's typically a lot of therapy can be advice driven. um and we, as the way our brains are hardwired and how our ego works and how we protect ourselves, like defense mechanisms just come up typically when we have advice. But if I'm saying the answer, or if I'm the one getting to, oh, this is what it's like that. I'm sure this has happened to you and your audience too, of like someone tells you something and you don't do it, but then like you're like, the moment you say it, you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I need." Or vice versa, you've told someone, like, countless times, "This is what you need to do," and they never do it, but the moment they're like, "This is what I need to do,"
Yep.
and you're like, "Hello, I've been
100%.
telling you that forever." So, anyhow, I had that knowing, and so it was about a month after I had made that r like, I know there's something, that I
Yeah.
found life coaching.
Okay.
And life coaching for me was totally life altering. Within 6 months, my finances were different. I met the man of my dreams, who is now my husband.
Yes.
I had cleaned up so many areas of my life. I grew up believing that I was a stupid piece of shit.
Mm.
Excuse
I think
me for
so
my
many can
French,
I know, I think so many people can relate
ladies.
to that. Yeah.
But that's really what I embodied, like, throughout life. Even though if you had known me at that time, you wouldn't have totally known it, but
Sure.
internally, that's what I was carrying.
Well,
All
I
of
think
that.
that happens all the time, right? Like, you're
Oh, yeah.
walking around, people are
The
like, "Oh,
facade.
you're so confident, everything's great," and you like, that doesn't mean that that person's not struggling.
No, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the face we put on too, so nobody
Mhm.
sees how much we're struggling, because it's shameful, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it completely altered my life. It 180'd my life.
180 to your life.
It
I love
180'd
that.
my life, and then that's where I was like, "Okay, this is what I'm gonna do the rest of my life. I'm gonna help others do the same," and, like, yeah, that's what
So
I've been
you
doing
got
ever
into
since.
it, like, I feel like very aligned, right? You did the work, you hit the rock bottom, you did the things, and then you found your calling, right?
Mhm.
As you were like, for people that are just getting started in like building a business, maybe becoming a coach themselves or doing something that they've like kind of always known they're supposed to do, but they haven't taken the steps. Did you have any resistance or any like lack of confidence? Like, how did you work through those early years of like being a beginner and being new?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, I had those. It was so much better because of the work I had done on myself and having healing of a lot of those aspects of myself, from before. So it was a lot easier to walk through, but
Mhm.
they were still there because it was something new and unknown, and yeah, having to navigate through it. Back then, too, like obviously social media was not a thing.
Yeah.
So, talk about confidence. This is how I built my business. I would cold calling
Yep.
out of a phone book, because
I've
there
done
was a
that. I've
phone
done
book
cold
back
call. I've
then.
I've done cold calling. I feel this deep in my
I'm
soul.
fully like aging myself right now too.
Same. And that's
Um,
okay. It's
yeah,
experience. We're
no,
experiencing
exactly,
ourselves.
exactly. So I was fully cold calling, and it was 40 calls a day. That was the commitment, to make 40 calls a day.
Yeah.
So I had to get over myself very quickly to
Mhm.
get to have to do that
Yep.
in business. So I think that's like, to your point or question,
Yeah.
um, get over yourself. Do the work that you need to do to be able to get over yourself. And each person has a little bit different type of work that needs to be done. We all have our different core causes or sources of why we act, don't act.
Yeah.
So you have to find what it is for you and walk through that, and what I call heal rather than deal with it.
Love. That is such good advice. Heal rather than deal, my friends.
Yes.
Okay, so you've now been a coach for 21 years. Okay,
Mhm.
that means you have probably seen it all. You've encountered all the personality
Oh,
types,
yeah.
all the things. Like, as a podcast that's like, hey, we want to help you be more confident and feel better in your skin and happy with who you are. What I think resonates is like some of the insecurities that you've seen. Like, what are some of the themes that you've seen in all of your clients that they've struggled with?
Yeah. 3 main things. 1, they're overdrivers,
Hmm.
overdriven. I can talk more a little bit about that if you want me to.
Yeah.
People
I mean,
pleasers.
say it again.
People pleasers.
Hmm.
So, overdrivers, people pleasers, and the lack of confidence, like doubt in
Okay.
themselves. Those are the 3 things. Because I work with high performing elite entrepreneur women now. Towards the beginning, it was more you didn't need to be as niched as you need to be now, because
Okay.
there wasn't as many coaches back then. It was just life coaching as a whole.
Sure.
So it wasn't quite as niche down, but I was always attracting business people is
Okay.
is what it seemed to be, whether they were first starting in 5 figures or 6 figures. Didn't matter what level they were at, those 3 things.
Okay. So let's break them down a little bit. Like, how do they show up? And do you feel like they were able to overcome at least one of them or some of it through the work they did with you?
Yes. I've never had a single I'll start with that one. Never had a single client in the last 21 years not fulfill the goals that we set out to at the
That
beginning of
is
their
incredible.
journal. Yeah, or
Amazing.
journey. Yeah, never, not once.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah,
Okay, so tell us
pretty
how.
proven track record. So,
Yeah, tell us how.
how do you wanna know how, or do you wanna know some details about the 3?
Whatever you think would be the most valuable.
I think knowing a little bit about the 3, and then I can share the how.
Perfect.
That overdriver, like, it really does come from this place of in childhood, typically the overdriver is someone who needed to perform
Mhm.
for some reason or another. Like it was either you needed to be a perfectionist because that's what the standard was in your home. You needed to constantly the family dynamic was constantly like a go go go, and you're
Mhm.
only going to be something great if you're constantly in the achievement mode. Um, and so that achievement mode became something of like, if I don't have that, then I'm not worth anything. And so
Mhm.
the self-worth very much so gets attached to the driver personality.
Yep.
The people pleaser, that one's more so from a place of same thing, something in childhood of like, I need to be the hero in the family because everyone else is in full on breakdown. I'm the one that has to hold it all together and make sure everyone's okay, because if everyone's not okay, then we're
Yeah.
all going to feel how unsafe things are in this environment. And so it's very much so that, like, again, hero role of
Sure.
like, I'll just do it. I had a
Yep.
client tell me that she took someone's cat for 2 weeks, even though she was like severely allergic to cats.
Okay. Yeah,
Why would
people
you
pleaser
do that?
definition. There you go.
Exactly.
Oh,
And then the confidence piece, the doubt, that I like most all human beings suffer
yeah.
from the lack of confidence. And that one typically comes from this place of like not really knowing who you are or why
Mhm.
you're actually here. And so there's almost like this, the doubt gets fed by a lack of clarity of
Yeah.
knowing again who you really are. And so you're not firmly planted in that. And when we're not firmly planted, it creates that essence of like, I'm not okay. And then
Mhm.
that's where that, lack of confidence comes from.
So good.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about all 3.
Okay, and so what would be like 1 to 2 tips for each, like, if anybody's listening to that, I know there's definitely people nodding their head saying, "Mhm, yep," or feeling that in their soul because they've experienced it themselves. What's like 1 to 2 tips for each of the 3 that could be implemented for the listeners if they resonate with that one to
Mhm.
start to deal with it and overcome it?
Okay, very good. And I want to give them more than just the dealing. Like it's
Yeah,
because the dealing it's like it's a constant management when you have to deal with something. Like if
sure.
you really tune into the word deal, it
Yes.
feels kind of heavy and like, oh, one more thing I have to deal with. So that's one reason why I like to look at it from a healing perspective.
Mhm.
And so to have healing of starting with the driver, there's all three actually need
Okay.
to go back to a place of why you're doing that. I'm going to call it behavior because there's behaviors attached to it. There are actions, there's ways that you act for each one of those three. And so going back to why you're doing what you're doing and really honing in on the why. What I mean by that is oftentimes we can ask ourselves, like, why am I doing this? And then you don't really answer it. You just kind of move on to another why question, or like,
Sure.
you get distracted by something else you need to drive yourself to do.
I love that.
Um, yeah, so you can't avoid the question. You have to allow yourself to sit in the uncomfortability of why you're doing something. And even better is if you could shift the question around from a why question to a what question.
Okay.
Reason being is because why questions tend to trigger our defense mechanisms. And
Mhm.
driver, people pleaser, and the lack of confidence has to do, it connects to some kind of a behavior that is trying to cover up or protect ourselves from something, right? And so if you shift the question, it engages a part of the brain that allows you to get very present. It's called the neocortex part of the brain. And that's the logical part of the brain.
Mhm.
It pulls you out of more of the emotional part of the brain, which is the amygdala. So
Yep.
if you ask yourself, let's say, why am I doing this? Why did I learn how to do that to start with? And shift the question to what has me do this? Or what had me start to do this as a child? There's a different energetic around it, and it allows an opening for you to actually focus in on the question versus, "Why did I do this?" Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think when you like the power of the pause and then the why, but I love reframing it into the what because I definitely practice the why and talk about that. But you could almost feel the energetic shift in just
Yeah,
the way you present it and when you said it. Hopefully, those listening feel that too. So I
yeah,
love the reframe of the what.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so good.
It's so powerful. And
And
that
you're gonna teach me to stop saying deal because you're so
yeah,
right. That word is so heavy. It's so
yeah,
heavy. And I mean, I know like we met at Girlfriends in Business. We had
mhm,
I loved having lunch with you. I was like, dang it, I want to talk to her even more. So I'm
yeah,
so happy that you're here. And I know you shared with me, like you've had quite the healing journey too. And I think that it would be really powerful to hear a little bit about like how your healing journey went. And I'm
mhm,
sure there'll be some really great stuff in there for the listeners too.
yeah. Yeah, so back when I first was telling you about my first healing, because really I've had 2 big healings in my life.
Okay.
The first one was the one I shared with you. The second one happened about 6 years ago when I met God. And, I have done, the self-help work without
Mhm.
him for the first I'm terrible at math, what was that, 16 years?
Yep.
Okay, good. 16 years. Hire me for coaching, not to be
Yes.
your accountant, okay?
Let's be clear, everybody, not a
Let's be
numbers
really
girly.
clear. Um, so that first 16 years, I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know him. I knew of him,
Yeah,
but I did not like know him. Then 6 years ago, I got really sick. I was so misaligned in my own life. Like, I had stopped doing the work I had done for myself. I was coaching others to do it, but wasn't doing it myself.
yeah.
I had this, like, chip on my shoulder, like, "I've done the work. I don't need to do anymore. Like, I'm exempt
Mm.
from stuff
Mhm.
now because I've done it." And was literally brought to my knees. I went to the hospital for a sickness that I had, like, nothing massive, but it got to the point where, like, it was a sinus infection, couldn't breathe. I ended up in the hospital, and I had a massive panic attack while I was there.
Oh,
And, like, to the point where they were putting, like, EKG machine on me, and yeah, not good. And I got stuck in that, and it created this,
yeah.
like, massive anxiety and insomnia that was, like, beyond. And I fully, yeah, I don't know how else to say it other than I got stuck in that, and it was a year-long journey of healing, but the healing was different this time. 1, I started to do the work that I was doing before, this 180,
Okay.
but 2, I started to get this feeling of, like, who is God? And maybe I'm missing something in not knowing who God is. I always had, like, some sense of spirituality,
Mhm.
but never really, dove deep into it. And in the darkest part of my life, like, literally, it was the hardest thing I have ever gone through. I feel like he met me there and just reached into the darkness and pulled me up and was like, "We have
Mm.
work to do. Let's go."
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
so that was my, like, second part of healing, and I'm telling you, like, this work of self-help is so much more powerful and profound, and, like, the confidence that you were talking about, like,
Yeah.
there is not even a comparison from before to now.
Mhm.
And so getting to incorporate that into the 180, I'm like, yeah.
How has your business changed since, like, if you look back, right, before you found God and had a relationship with God, how has your relation or how has your business shifted when you compare
Mm.
the 2?
So much. Like, I didn't have to. I chose to do a whole rebrand. That was the
Okay.
first thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was difficult in that, like, here I had all these clients that I had worked with up until that point, and now I'm like, "Hey, that was all great, but it means nothing now because of him, and, like,
Yeah.
this is now, like, so much better." So I was struggling with, how do I even rebrand? How do I even bring God into a conversation that I've never spoken of him before or talked about him? And so that aspect was challenging at first. And then once I, like, fully surrendered and embraced that, it opened up, like, a floodgate of prosperity and wealth. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is before I was always overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Had so much work, I was so overwhelmed, or I didn't have a lot of work and I was overwhelmed by,
Overwhelmed.
gotta get my
Yeah.
funnel filled and I have to do all the stuff and I have to get out there to, and, like, now in my business, it's just this easeful kind of flow. Um, and sometimes there is that, like, feast or famine in the coaching business.
Sure.
It can feel a lot like that, but there's such a sense of, like, trust and ease to it that it doesn't have that same energetic pull as it did before. So it's and now I'm training others in this 180 method too. So before, I very much so felt like, "No, this is mine, and I can't share it with anybody else because it's my special thing, my,
Sure.
specialty kinda thing."
Yeah, you had that gatekeeping, that scarcity. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, and now
Yeah.
I'm like, "That wasn't mine at all." Like, that was his. So,
So
yes,
wait,
like,
so
let's get it out there.
let's talk about that because once you were like, "I'm gonna incorporate it into this," did it take off? Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. For about 8 years, I made the exact six-figure income within, like, $10 a year. For 8 years in a row, I could not get beyond
Through it. Yeah.
that dollar amount with and it fluctuated, I'm not kidding, like, within $10 for 8
That's
years.
crazy.
And then once that shift was made, yeah.
Yeah, I hear this all the time from entrepreneurs that I talk to that like have the, pre God, post God, and then they have this like faith centered approach now to their business. And it's really interesting and it's something that I encourage people to look at. And it doesn't necessarily have to be God. It can be like a higher power, a universe, whatever you want it to be. But I mean, I say relationship with God, but whatever works for you, there is a higher power. I truly believe that. And once you can see the like before and the after, it's
Mhm.
the overwhelm, it just shifts. It's like a different feeling
Oh,
because you're
yeah.
right. When you're on that like hustle, that hamster wheel, it's like I have so much work. I'm totally overwhelmed. I have not enough work. Now I'm scared and overwhelmed about finances.
Yeah. It's so
And you said something earlier too that I want to like come back to that just dawned on me
what's
is you
that?
were like, you had two healing journeys,
Yeah.
right? And you were coaching people on these things and then it's like you stopped and that happens I think so much to coaches is you're able to help the others but you're not like pouring into yourself
Yeah.
and you're not helping yourself and I think that it's really important to have like little checkpoints within
Mhm.
the journey if you are a coach to make sure that like you're still practicing what you preach and
Mhm.
you're still okay because as a coach you are pouring into others so
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
that you have to make sure that like you're filling your cup somewhere too and whether that's with like friends or partnerships or coworkers or people in the same space but I think that that's so important because those people can call you when you're
Mm.
slipping. They can be like,
Oh, yeah.
"Hey, you're sliding. What's going on?" And I
Yeah.
think that that's
Exactly.
important to know and to just like it happens to all of us, right? Like healing
Mhm.
is truly an ongoing journey. It's not like, "Okay, I've healed. I'm good."
Yeah, exactly. Like, done. No. Life is a growth journey. If you're not spiritually growing, you will always be stuck and stagnant. I have so many clients too that like, "I'm stuck and I don't know, like, how to get out." And
Yeah.
it's like, well, yeah, because 'cause you've landed in a complacent place within your own personal growth and journey. So, of course, you're gonna experience that externally too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So good. So, okay. So I know you've coached like over 5,000 clients
Mhm.
and you've coached them to like six, seven, eight, even figures. What's like, what's the number one like tip that you have or a couple that you see consistently that like if implemented will help make an impact and grow a business? Like, cause
Yeah.
you've coached like, let me also make clear for our listeners, like you've coached so many different verticals.
Yes.
You're very, very well spread around the business world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you
So
think is like, yeah, like
mhm.
share some like good, meaty like takeaways for our entrepreneurial listeners.
Yeah. My top number 1 thing is around ownership.
Mhm.
Um, ownership is like this just I feel like it's gold and people don't put as much attention into, and what I mean by ownership is taking ownership of almost like taking captive is what I also mean, like ownership of the things that you normally would not ever take ownership of. So, for example, when I talked about the whole stupid piece of shit thing, which came from an
Yeah.
experience in my childhood, when I actually owned that I'm a stupid piece of shit, which I know sounds so illogical and like, why would you
Yeah.
own that? No, you're not. And I've had
Yeah.
this is what the one it's a 180. It's a 180, which is the 180 method. In taking ownership, what once owned you no longer owns you. What you don't own owns you.
So good. And you know what? Like, I feel like I don't want to, like, if you're in a job too, same thing. Like, you don't
Yeah.
just have to be a business owner to have that work for you.
No,
It,
exactly.
yeah, it applies to anything.
It
So
applies to
good.
anything, and it's like, that's what we typically end up fighting, like, the doubt. It's,
Yeah.
traditional self-help could do a lot of, like, affirmations or meditation around something or journaling around it to try and get out of that, but then you're constantly fighting against it. It's like, "I'm not okay with this, so let me fight against it," and the only thing the fight does is make it bigger and greater. It might take away the energetic of it for a little bit, but then it
Hmm.
always comes back. Long-term ownership is the path to freedom.
So good. So good. I love it. Okay. So much gold. Anything else you want to share with us, or maybe talk a little bit about the 180 method, how we can find you, how our listeners can connect with you if they're looking for help and guidance? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I talk about this a lot, which is kinda like the foundation of the 180, is that we're human beings, right? So
Mhm.
we're both human being while we're here. That's why we're called human beings. And the
Yeah.
human part of us is very physical. That's the body, but that's also our soul. And this is where people get a little confused or mixed up on the soul.
Hmm.
The soul is made up of your mind, of your will, of your emotions, your personality, your behaviors, your beliefs. Basically, anything and everything that needs healing falls under the soul level, and it's all human based stuff. Our being is our spirit, and this is that part of us that's made in God's image, and it's our direct link to Him. So when we're born, we're totally connected to that being part of us because the mind hasn't been developed yet. We haven't learned behaviors yet. We haven't taken on beliefs yet.
Yeah.
But what happens through life is we slowly start to disconnect from the being, almost like envision like a rope, and like
Yeah.
the strands of the rope like start to disconnect. And so that rope was solid to God. And then as the human part starts to develop, those strands start disconnecting and we become very disconnected. And that's how we end up being human doings instead of
Hmm.
human beings. So the 180 method is all about the healing of is the reconnecting of the strands back to your being. So you're operating out of that being part of yourself more often than the human part.
Oh, so good. I love it. Okay. So, that's so good. I have chills. Where can we find, like, what's the
Yeah.
best way for everyone to connect with you or to learn more about that or to just work with
Yeah.
you?
Awesome. I think we have a little freebie for them, so you can
Okay.
visit that link, right? But you can also find me on Instagram at the Baller Coach. That's the best place. But I'm the Baller Coach anywhere social media wise, YouTube, TikTok,
Yeah.
Facebook. Yes, the
And
Baller Coach.
she is so fun to follow, you guys. She puts out great inspirational stuff that's like you'll just see it and you're like, "Aha, I needed that today." So, definitely go give her a follow, check it out. Thank you so much for being here today and pouring into our community of hotties.
Appreciate
We appreciate you so much. And until next time, my girls.
Yeah.